Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press, and welcome to our show, Organizing in the Time of COVID-19. Today, I'm really excited that we have an amazing guest with us today. Silvia Ribeiro, who's born in Uruguay and now lives in Mexico, is the Latin American director of the ETC Group, Action Group on Erosion, Technology and Concentration. She's for more than 2 decades, she studied the impact of new technologies, especially biodiversity, rural livelihoods, and indigenous people. She's well known internationally as a lecturer, writer, educator, and as a journalist. She writes regularly for the La Jornada in Mexico and other newspapers and on-site magazines. The ETC group for whom she works is really quite an extraordinary group of people producing the most really superb materials on technologies, and it's one of the things that it's a shame that so few people know about the extraordinary resources that you can find there. And I would really encourage you all to visit the website and explore it, because there is a rich amount of material there. And of course, with Sylvia today, we'll be talking about some of her crucial work on technology. But in particular, Sylvia's work, if I recall, first of all, welcome to our show.
Hi, Firoz. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here with you and have this chance to chat with you.
It's so great to have you on the show, Sylvia. Lovely to see you again. I just about to say, you've been working on the industrial food systems for many years. And this goes back to the time of the rise of swine flu. And I mean, this is the industrial food system, which is producing huge amounts of livestock, animal foods, and concurrently creating conditions, as I understand it, of generating zoonotic viruses which transfer from the animal kingdom to humans. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work on this, and how do we understand the industrial food systems?
Well, the whole industrial food system is particularly relevant now. I mean, in this crisis, in the COVID-19 crisis, because although it's not directly connected in this case to for instance, to a pig or a chicken, like the swine flu or the avian flu, it is definitely the main background, the main cause of being fabricating new virus that can be dangerous for people and animals. And like you said, all the infectious virus, that all the epidemics and pandemics we had in the last decades are of zoonotic origin, and that is either wild animals or animals that were in confinement, that were livestock breeds. And I saw that you, in this series about COVID, had interviewed Rob Wallace, and of course he has the majority of the information and most of the proofs that shows that all these viruses, in one way or the other, are connected to industrial livestock breeding, not only to just breeding of livestock, but particularly to industrial agriculture in general, and also the destruction of habitats, which is also connected to the emergence of virus.
Can you say a little bit more about the environmental destruction that leads to that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, on one hand, we have the actual industrial agriculture, and what we know is larger and larger farms and larger confined animal operations of particularly pigs and chicken and so. But if we see at FAO, at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, they even recognize that up to 70 or 80%, depending on the countries, of the deforestation is caused by the expansion of what they call the agricultural frontier. So it's either for cattle breeding or for pasture or for planting feed for animals. The majority of the grains that are planted today in the world, that are seeded, that are sown, sorry for my Spanglish, the majority of the grains that are cultivated today are for animal fodder. So this is the main cause of deforestation, all these different factors together that relate to the industrial agriculture and industrial livestock breeding. So in countries like Brazil, we saw last year that it was dramatic, all these fires and everything. That was because of expansion of the cattle breeding in Brazil, and it's up to 80%. This destroys the natural habitats, and that is what expel the animals out of their natural habitats.
I think that's a really important point, which I wasn't entirely hadn't made the connection clearly, but what you're pointing out is that agriculture, even of seeds, growing food for animal. In other words, it's not just animal breeding; it's agriculture in terms of farming of cereals and so on, for which is directly connected to this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's directly connected. It's that it's part of the whole system, and it is definitely connected. But it's connected in the sense that, for instance, as I said, of agricultural land in the world, 75%. Listen to this, because I know when I heard it first time, I was like shocked. This is a figure of United Nations, of the United Nations Development Program, and 75% of the agricultural land is used for either for cattle or for animal breeding or for planting animal fodder. So this is 75% of the agricultural land. So this is also the main factor let me put it again. Industrial agriculture, the industrial food system, from seeds to supermarkets and all the waste and all the transport and energy it uses and oil it uses, is the main cause of climate change. And inside that, the main cause of climate change, the principal cause is livestock breeding, because of all this, because of so much land, water, nutrients, and everything they take. And on top of that, this also functions like a virus factory, which is what Rob Wallace explained so well. And this is because of the conditions of the animal. So either because, for instance, bats or civets or other animals where the different epidemics of the recent decades has been traced to, either because they are expelled or because they are starting to be breeded industrially to sell in markets sometimes. That also happen not with bats, but with other animals. So either they are in these reservoirs of tropical forest or forest in general, and they keep there, like there is virus that are circulating there, but they are in the animals and in the population of animals, and the animals have created some kind of resistance, and the virus doesn't go out. But then when they are expelled, they come in contact with thousands, sometimes could be many thousands of animals that lives in overcrowded conditions. And then you have the perfect factory, which is what Rob Wallace showed, which is like many individuals in the same place, very crowded, and they are also being subject to very, very uniform food, that most of it is transgenic grains, but also other grains where they use a lot of chemicals. So they are also subject to a lot of agrochemicals and agrotoxics. And that made that these animals, besides being really non-human, if we can call it so, I mean, besides that, those animals have very, very weakened immune systems. So when a virus can rapidly go from one individual to the other one and be, and meet other virus in the same herd, so they can rapidly or relatively rapidly mutate. They have the conditions to mutate. And that is what happened with swine flu. That is what happened with avian flu. But that is what's happening basically with almost all virus that has been, one of these processes, either wildlife that has been out of their habitats and in touch with humans, or that has been in touch with animals, and then the animals with humans. And all this is like a general process. It's even more kind of perverse that we are not speaking about this as one of the main causes of COVID-19, because it also related to the weakened immune system of humans, and the lack of resistance of humans is also the lot of bad food that we are exposed through the corporations that dominates both livestock breedings and processing of grains and seeds, and also the whole chain until it comes to us. So it's not directly connected as you asked, but it's very connected. It's part of the same system, and that's what we need to question for sure.
And this is fascinating, because this is something that ETC Group has been working on extensively. This connection between health, between industrial food production, environmental destruction, and of course climate change. And I think that's a very important connection that we talk about. But we also read that people say, well, we're now living in advanced capitalist societies, and well, how are you going to feed everyone? So these kind of farms are needed. There's no alternative. But what's your view on that?
Well, that is of course totally wrong. But of course, for us, for ETC, we have been working, like you said, for many years. ETC has been following the corporate concentration in food and agriculture for over 30 years. That is about the corporations, what the corporations are doing with technologies they are doing, how this impact us. And because of that, we could just put together the lines between the dots when we started seeing all these new infections and all that, and we could follow that because of this work. But it's totally not true that the majority of the world is fed by industrial agriculture. In fact, the opposite is right. I have here, but you can look at it at our website.
Right.
This is just a popular version. But it's a very, it's a research that we have been working on for over 10 years, that shows that 70% of the world's population is mainly derive their food from what we call the peasant food web. And peasants are not only peasants and campesinos and small farmers, as we could think. Part of that is produced in those small farms, and milpas and other places, but also part of that is produced in cities, like in urban agriculture and urban horticulture, that in many countries in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, there is a lot of them, but also is getting very popularized in the north. And another of these figures that really blow your mind is like 15 to 20% of all the food that is produced in urban agriculture. So because of that, we don't separate it from people that are in rural areas, because many times they are expelled or migrated people from the countries that continue, cultivating in cities. And in some cities, it's really significant. And all this together makes that 70% of the population of the world derive their main food from these networks that are not industrial agriculture. But I see that you want to ask something. I want to add something, but please go with
please carry on.
No, because I didn't answer your question. Why is that people says that the food won't be enough, But what I say is that industrial agriculture, as I said before, 75% of the land is devoted in industrial agriculture to produce fodder for animals in confinement, and those animals fed to people. This is an incredible waste of resources, of energy, of water. That the same, it's kind of the same thing happens also with industrial agriculture, with crops, because the amount of waste that the industrial agriculture produces is also enormous. According to FAO again, they say that it's between 33 and 40%. We have estimated that until, the consumption at homes with all the packaging and the things that you need for industrial food is more than that. It's about 50%. So yes, the industrial agriculture produces a lot of food that is very uniform, that is not so nutritious, that is not diverse or varied or culturally appropriate or anything of that. But they produce a lot of food, but they also waste a lot of food. In this document that I really recommend you to look at this. This is a popular version that answers 24 questions on who produces the food and who cares for biodiversity, who doesn't care, who cares for livestock and all that. But listen to only one thing in the light of the COVID crisis. For every dollar paid for industrial food, it costs another $2 to clean up the environmental and health mess that the industrial food chain produces. And that means that in diseases, in the main diseases, which are the diseases that people die for, and also infection diseases now, and also in environmental cleaning because of an industrial agriculture and industrial livestock breeding. We pay double as a society. We have to pay double as much as we pay for every dollar we pay on industrial agriculture. So there are a lot of hidden aspects of industrial agriculture. For instance, I was thinking that, according to the World Health Organizations, the main reasons for the 10 more common diseases that people die in the world are non-transmittable diseases. So they are non-virus or bacteria or anything like that. 72% are related to other kinds of diseases. For instance, to cardiovascular diseases, including hypertension and others, to cancers, to diabetes, that is a big epidemic just now. Many of them caused by obesity, and all this is related again to the same system. So until now, we know that the industrial food and farming system and livestock breeding is related to the main causes of death that are non-transmittable, but it's also related to the transmittable diseases like virus and bacteria. So we really, really need to question this way of production, because it is the cause of many of the expenses and the cost in health and environmental destruction that we are suffering today.
Well, given the importance and the role of industrial agriculture in generating these kind of viruses, and we are facing a pandemic now at the moment with COVID-19, why does nobody talk about this? You can go through newspapers, magazines, and so on. There's silence. I mean, who are the corporations involved? Why is it that corporate media is not drawing attention to this? Because it seems to me, unless we address that, unless we stop that production, that method of production, we are condemned to cycles of pandemics.
Yeah. Of course, you are totally right. And let me say one general reflection is that, this about not knowing the causes is fundamental for the whole capitalist system. I mean, what is happening now with this and not going to the causes is a basic mean of survival for capitalism, because otherwise they would have to change the very causes of what's the problem. And the reason why industrial agriculture and industrial livestock breeding has been growing so much and in a kind of unstoppable way is because there is larger and larger corporation and less corporation that are larger and larger. And this is the process we have been following for 30 years. So from seeds today, you today have, seeds is the kind of companies that we have heard more about, like Monsanto. Of course, everybody has heard about Monsanto, that now is owned by Bayer. It's Bayer, not Monsanto, but it's the same company. But between Bayer, Syngenta, Monsanto, Monsanto is in Bayer. Bayer, Syngenta, which is Chinese now. Syngenta is part of ChemChina. Corteva, which is the fusion of DuPont and Dow Chemicals, and BASF. I mean, those four companies, they control 100% of the transgenic seeds in the world, but they also control over 70% of the commercial market for agrochemicals and for commercial seeds. So they control the first steps of this. And they are, of course, very connected to the companies that come after them, which is the food processors. For instance, Cargill, ADM, Dreyfus, and now COFCO, which is Chinese. I'm thinking, well, maybe I forgot some of them, but you can look at that in another of our reports that I will tell you now. Yeah. But in trade grain, it's also like 5 companies dominate almost 90%, and in livestock breeding, it's the same. You have the livestock breeders that has been, buying each other in fusions and buy-ins and acquisitions. And, now today we have companies like GBS, which is the larger meat processor in the world, which originally Brazilian, but is now, a mix of different companies, and is based also in the US. And then, and you have other livestock processors and livestock breeders like CP, that is based in Thailand, that is the main in chicken. And I'm not so familiar with the names of livestock, more with seeds, but WH Group also in Hong Kong, and EW Group in Germany. And those companies have, for instance, the majority of the over 50% of the market in livestock in general. But one of the most scary things, I think, is that only 3 companies, some of these ones and one more, only 3 companies have all the poultry genetics in the world. And others, almost 2 of them and another, have almost the majority of the pig genetics in the world. What means this is that the chickens in the world and even the layers or other chickens, for meat, are the same. They have the same genetics. So it's millions of chickens with the same genetic composition, exactly the same, so to say. So what means is that any disease that comes there has found paradise. All the individuals are the same, all has a quickened immune system. And this is what really is a factory of diseases. It's a factory of resistant bacteria, resistant diseases, and so on top of all that, on top of these companies doing that, the World Health Organization made a call in 2017 asking livestock breeders, but even fish farming, and even all kinds of livestock, I mean, chicken, pig, cows, and also fish farming, to stop using antibiotics, because 80%, Firoze, 80% of the antibiotics that are used in the world are used for animal breeding. So of course they generate enormous problems of resistance.
Well, I mean, ETC Group has been working on this for decades, but today, in the context of a pandemic, the urgency of dealing with this seems to me quite substantial. Never before have we had to really address what is happening in the industrial food system. So people watching the show, people listening to this amazing descriptions and analysis that you're providing, what actions should we now be taking? What are the next steps in organizing? Because it is a pandemic, and it's one of several new pandemics that are threatened. So there is an urgency, it seems to me, here. So how do we organize in the time of COVID?
Well, there is not only this pandemic. The issue is that all the causes are there. So the causes, it will be other pandemics. So it's not only this one. This happened now, and we are using, I mean, we as citizens and people, whatever we are using millions and billions of monies, whatever currency it is, to combat this particular pandemic. But the causes of the pandemic and the whole mechanism, the whole factory of viruses and resistant bacteria is there. So it will be another one. So we have to act at many different levels at the same time. And one thing is, of course, that we have to question the presence of these large companies, transnationals, in the whole food system, I would say, because it is damaging in each step of the system by contamination with agrochemicals, by uniformity seeds and transgenic seeds, by livestock breedings, and then when we eat it, and all the problem we have in health by eating this kind of food. So one thing is, yeah, we have to be aware of that. We have to make the connection between the actual pandemic and all the crisis that is generating of many different levels, and the industrial food production, not food, and in general agriculture production, agriculture and livestock. So that we need to know, we need to question, because I never finish my sentence on, capitalists never go to the causes of the problems, because it makes a business of the cures. And that is exactly what is happening now again. So nothing about the causes, but a lot of business about the cures or things that we can do because of the crisis that is producing. So everything is about doing a new business of the problems. And that is what we need to be aware. We need to resist that. For instance, now everything is postponed, but there are a lot of processes in United Nations where we need to input this. There is the post-2020 process in the Convention on Biological Diversity that we need to input in to say, well, this cannot be. The destruction of ecosystems has to be connected with the presence of large corporations and the industrial food system. That is one of the places. I mean, it's processes that are ongoing that will resume at some point, even virtually maybe. There is also FAO needs to do this. There is a proposal now to make a new food summit, but this proposal was not coming from FAO, from farmers' organizations, from the people that are producing the foods, the most affected. No, it's coming from the Davos Forum and the Secretariat of the United Nations that approved to make a new food summit because they saw the business coming. All that is happening now and the new things that can come with new technologies in agriculture, which is not what we are discussing now, but is connected to what we are saying. So we need to get engaged into this and, for instance, say that this cannot be a summit of corporations, which is the ones that has produced all this damage. This must be a summit of the people, like Via Campesina, like farmers' organizations, like decentralized production in the world, and many others that that have a lot of knowledge and proposals for good food that is not producing all this kind of good and sustainable and healthy food that is not producing all this problem. So this is another input that we could have. There are more at United Nations, but that is only one level. We also need to organize to share this information, but also to highlight the importance of this decentralized production in small units, either artisanal fishermen and many women. The majority are women, in fact, in the peasant world, and and all the campesinos and campesinas working in the land. We need to see that this is fundamental everywhere in the world, not only in the south. In the south and in the north, we need to have decentralized, localized, diverse food systems, and that is something that has to be supported. So it's a very concrete thing that we can do to prevent the next pandemic, but also to have much better resources for this one. To have good food, to have healthy food, to have things that can help our immune system to resist even this pandemic, and that will not depend on a new techno fix from corporations, either in the form of a vaccine or anything, because that will pass and will not help us to be sustainable and take care of everything we need to take care in the planet.
I mean, one important thing that you've raised is emphasizes is that the majority of the world's food is not produced by these big agricultural industries. It's produced, you're saying, urban farmers are involved in this. Now, in the time of COVID, where in many countries, I don't know whether this is happening in Mexico, but what is happening is that there's a lockdown. People are not allowed out. What impact is this going to have, or is having already, on small-scale production of food?
Well, the small-scale production of food is continuing, in fact, because many is decentralized and is kind of, they have a lot of resilience that industrial systems doesn't have. The risk now, we have many risks. Well, of course, one thing is that this crisis impact very unequal in the world. So people in the rural areas are less informed. Indigenous peoples are less informed. They don't exactly know, but they get all these restrictions that also people in the city have seen directly. But peasants are really finding very creative ways to continue working and to reach to people in the cities. I've seen, for instance, document that small videos and so from the landless people in Brazil, the MST, that in their settlements, in the places that are recuperated from the agrarian reform, they continue producing food because, in a way, this is a healthy system, a healthy ecosystem that they can protect themselves in many ways. And ways of doing so, this food is reaching other people in the cities, particularly people in not only in other settlements or camps as they have in Brazil in this case, but also to people in the cities. In Mexico City, for instance, I get my food now, and we, in our neighborhood, we get our food from a very small farmers markets that continue to come to the city, that has taken a lot of prevention, because the virus really exists. So we are not joking, the virus doesn't exist and we don't care. No, we care, but we are trying to intensify this way of, direct connections of small farmers markets, not big ones that doesn't cost lots of people to go, but that can get to people in the city with better food, and it's also a way for them to be sustained. But again, I mean, this is unavoidable. I mean, the unjust world we live in is also mirroring, what is happening with the crisis. Of course, the people that has the less resources, the people that have that cannot get to care system, health systems, and so they will suffer a lot. We don't know how much. I mean, in rural areas, if they are more healthy, you have more space, and maybe the virus doesn't circulate so much. I cannot say that. But what I can say is that they have a fundamental role today. And that role is everybody's responsibility, not only to strengthen, but to see how we organize to provide this kind of, decentralized. So that's another way of resistance we can have. this Friday on April 17th is the day of peasants' struggles that Via Campesina named since 1999, when they killed a lot of people in Brazil, landless people, and since then they have been, having this day of campesino struggles. And we think, for instance, that this Friday, Via Campesina will be highlighting many of these, not only struggles, but also the work that they are doing that is so fundamental for everybody. And that is also another way of resisting. I think that the answer to your question is broader than that, and I don't have, and we don't have in ETC, not all the answers, but much less than that. So we only have a little part of the answers. But I think that we need to find, I really like what Rob Wallace said in the interview, when he said, well, this is because globalization, because, breeding hogs in China, or in this case, the virus that came from bats or from others comes to us so quick, is because of all these, globalized trade and globalized corporations. And we need to find other way. We need to find a way of, with the knowledge we have at local level, with our very different, diverse knowledge, we have to create real internationalism, which is, solidarity in the way we can, and realize which are the really important things that we need to strengthen each other. And that is, these different levels is the kind of we can do. But just now, I want to emphasize, we have an opportunity to denounce and really denounce the role of the industrial food system in this kind of pandemics.
I think that's absolutely right. And the core of that, as you say, is the building of solidarity. For not to overuse an expression which I keep hearing, and that is solidarity is what love looks like on the streets. I think that's a very good starting point. And I think as Arundhati Roy puts forward, we are at a portal. We have an opportunity, a contestation here between the continuity of the destructive world that business wants to create, and the alternative world, the world based on love and solidarity, and small farmer production. That's, I think, the challenge that we face today. So I want to thank you really so much, Sylvia, for a really interesting and an informative discussion. We're not looking at none of us have the exact solutions, but until we can actually understand the problem that we are facing and the scale of it, then I don't think, that's a really important first step before we can, before we bring out the tablets and say, take 2 of these 3 times a day.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Firoze. I wanted to show this, sorry, you can see it. It's our latest report on mapping corporate power in the world, and it's a lot about corporations. And I would really recommend people to download it from ETC website.
What's it called again?
The document is called plate, like in plate, food plate tectonics.
Okay.
And it's about corporate power in big food and agriculture.
Right. Well, let me just show it on your website. This is This is where you will find it. Plate tectonics.
Yes. And it is in Spanish and English.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's really helpful. I encourage everyone to download this and many of the other reports, which are beautifully written, detailed, and extraordinarily informative. But that's what we've come to expect from the ETC group, isn't it? So thank you so much, Sylvia. And a real pleasure to see you again. So
the same. Thank you, Firoze, and thank you for all these interviews. They have been really useful.
Thank you. I'm glad that somebody's using them.
Yeah, I'm sure that. Okay.
Well, all the best,
Thank
and
you.
look after yourself, huh?
Yeah.
And we'll be in touch, I'm sure, soon. Okay. Okay. Goodbye then.
Goodbye.
That was Silvia Ribeiro from ETC Group. I thought was a really interesting exposition of the challenges we face from corporate industrial farming. This is Firoz Manji signing off today on organizing at the time of COVID. This afternoon, we're staying with Mexico. We'll be interviewing John Holloway and Raquel Gutierrez Aguila in a couple of hours. So please stay tuned in and come and listen to, I think, what will be a really interesting interview. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be in touch again soon. All the best, everyone.